Basically, it's a sticky note type of program. And I use it basically for 5 different things in my class. One would be like a warm-up conversation where I might ask them a question about courage and they would stick all their sticky notes up there. We'd talk about them. We've done whole class character analyses. So I'll divide up characters and they'll throw up quotes from the stories and we'll talk about them. I really like to use it for small group poetry analysis. So we did To Live in the Borderlands, and you can actually have several pages. And this was just the students doing a sticky note analysis of the poems, and we got to talk about it. And then I also use it for informal assessment. And actually, this is one of the things that the students have said has been very helpful. So sometimes at the very end of class, say we've gone over a term like naturalism in the storm, and I'm not exactly sure if all the students have grasped the concept, I can ask them to show me naturalism in the storm. And here the student says, this quote represents naturalism because it shows how he's driven by natural instincts. And I can use this as an example to the class and say, hey, I think you're getting it. This is good. And students like that it's anonymous. So if they feel like they missed the point or didn't get it, they're not called out or embarrassed in class. And it's also a great way for brainstorming essays. So again, students like it because it's anonymous. They can see others' ideas and you get to kind of visualize the process of analysis. And it's worked really well for me. So there you go.
Thanks, Mary. That's really great. I've tried to use that. Just my computer has a sticky note function. So sometimes when I've done the video lectures, I've used that, but I love the idea of doing that with the students. Thank you so much. Emily, I think you're next on my list and I see you there, so.
Okay, awesome. Thanks so much. Hi, everybody. I hope you're all doing okay here at the end of the semester. I just wanted to share a quick kind of tip that's been working for me this semester, because usually in the before times, I did a lot of group work, a lot of writing on the board, and asking my students to do writing on the board, you know, maybe moving from group work to writing on the board to full class discussion. So I was looking for something to kind of replace or approximate that kind of kinetic, collaborative action. And so I've been using something you might be familiar with. It's a website called Poll Everywhere, polleverywhere.com. And it calls itself an audience engagement tool. But I do think that the title Poll Everywhere is a little misleading because it's not just polls. You can create things that are called activities where students can respond on their phones or on their laptops. And their responses appear on the screen in real time. So I'm going to share my screen as well, just for one quick example. Well, it's not letting me share. That's okay. Let's see. Maybe I can get it going here.
Yeah, it should be set that everyone can share, Emily, but that's about as far as my technological expertise will go.
Here, I think I've got it. Yeah. Thanks. Sorry about that. This is the very first activity I created in Poll Everywhere. So I just go right into the website. It's free to use. And this was, again, a first very basic activity I tried out in my classes. Identifying and starting to analyze literary devices, and especially in an older text like Julian of Norwich, and it worked really well, so I stuck with it throughout the semester. So I like that you can kind of have students do this on their own or turn to kind of do a pair and share with someone sitting nearby. And then they can submit these responses. They appear in real time, and you can kind of play with the display and click on them, sort of like that Jamboard as well. And then I always can build from class discussion from there. So it's worked really well. And I'll just make a couple of quick notes about how students use it. You can see at the top, there are these codes. So every time you create an activity, it generates a special code. And students can, from their phone or a laptop, they can go to this website, or I love the text feature. It's been really easy for students to just sort of submit the code, and then it opens this activity and they can send in their responses. So let's see. Stop sharing there. Okay. I'll make just a couple of quick notes about the display before I leave you. I really like that you can play around with what the activity looks like. So in that example, it was a word cloud, but you can do like a bulletin board layout. There's also, you know, multiple choice. That's more like a poll where you can do a Q&A or kind of a sliding scale. So there's different options for, you know, if you want this to be a longer activity, like in the example that I've used, or something shorter and quicker just for kind of recall. And you have the option to have students submit anonymously, or they can provide screen names depending on how you might want to evaluate the activity. And you have the option to use the website like this, or you can embed the poll right in your PowerPoint slide. And again, it'll generate in real time. So I think that's really cool. But yeah, lastly, why I love it, you can choose for it to be multiple choice, more like a true poll, or it can be open-ended, like in those responses that I showed you. It's free. You can pay for all the bells and whistles, but you really don't need it. And I think that's kind of the beauty of this app, is that it's kind of bare bones. There's not a lot of extra stuff to get distracted, whether I'm getting distracted or students getting distracted. It's very simple and kind of speaks their language, especially with the texting option. And it really has broken up class well. It's not as kinetic as that kind of writing on the board, but it's kind of getting that job done, breaking things up, and a little bit of collaboration as well. And the last thing I want to note about it that I so appreciate is that Poll Everywhere saves student responses, and you can download it as a spreadsheet or a Word doc. And so I always do that, and then I submit it or upload it to Canvas so that students just have their work, have ideas from other students, and we always kind of can go back and throughout the semester kind of build on those activities. And I like that they can have it where they can access it. So yeah, polleverywhere.com. Thank you guys.
Thanks, Emily. I love that you hijack their phones too. So now they're texting about literature and not other things. That's great. Holly, would you like to go next?
Yeah, I can go next. So I don't have fancy technology to share with y'all, but I just wanted to share a few notes about what I found really helpful this semester, and that is kind of rhythm, both for myself and for my students. And so I did a few surveys throughout the semester, which I highly recommend. I did one before the semester started, one just a couple weeks in, and then one near the midpoint. And I just used Google surveys, and I was able to ask them questions like, can you hear me? Can you hear your classmates? How is group work going? Those sorts of things. So if you're trying things that you're not sure if they're gonna work the same way this semester as they did pre-masks, pre-COVID, I found that really helpful just to give that feedback, and that created some structure as well. One of the things I found from doing those surveys was that my students really appreciated that I use the same types of assignments every week, because you know, a lot of them are coming in and out with quarantining, and so because they are missing class, knowing what they're going to expect on a Monday, what they're going to expect on a Wednesday, what they're going to expect on a Friday really helped them. So like I had a reading response Monday, discussion question Wednesday, quiz Friday. And I know a lot of us do that normally, but I just found that was so important and so helpful this semester. So I'd really think about how can you teach them the fewest number of assignment types to accomplish your goals, because that's just going to be above and beyond more useful this year. And then I would also say that I tried to create rhythm in how I organized Canvas, and that matched the syllabus, which I'm sure a lot of us have been doing with whether we're teaching online or in person. But like I have a reading column in my syllabus, I have a submission column in my syllabus, and I mimic that with my Canvas organization. So it's just really clear for them, especially for the students who are quarantining. Which does lead to another kind of expectation about the rhythm. Something that I was surprised about as I taught this past semester was just that it is more than normal to have students missing and not being in class. And so kind of having that psychological expectation that you're going to have students out really helps you as you're thinking about things. And then because of that, with Baylor's fancy video cameras, having a regular rhythm of posting the video recordings also is really important, because when I didn't have a regular rhythm, I'd forget to post them, and then you worry about the students and whether or not they can access them. And so I would say that, like, what worked for me is that I would make it the last task of the workday, each day that I taught, is I would save a PowerPoint from the class day and upload it to Canvas, and I would go into my media and post a video, and that helped kind of create that rhythm and keep that focus. So those are just some general, like, very basic things, but they really helped me and my students stay on track and kind of know what was going on this semester. So yeah.
Thank you, Holly. I had several of you who are sharing kind of apologize for the basicness of your suggestions, but I just wanted to say, as someone who hasn't yet taught in person during COVID, that they're not basic. They're things that I wouldn't have thought about. So they probably seem basic to you all because you've done it for a semester, but I really appreciate even those basic concepts. Josh, would you like to go next?
Sure. And I'll just say a few words about, I'm going to share about a project that some students and I did, a digital project that helped us collaborate in a class that ended up evolving constantly in its form of engagement. So we began face-to-face, then half the students elected to go online. We became hybrid, and we're hybrid synchronous. Then we had some contact tracing, and for our mutual safety, we thought that the last about week and a half would be totally online. So we went through every single mode of, mode of engagement. In this particular class, and it was a new class that I was teaching, so that was all the more interesting. But one way that we found to engage with one another across that time was through doing a shared digital exhibition. And I'll just share my screen a little bit to give you a sense of it. So thank you for your patience as I get this up here. You should be able to see it now. This is the Baylor Blogs homepage. We built this through Baylor Blogs. If you've not used Baylor Blogs before, everybody has access to it, instructors and students. And you can go to the site registration and find out all about how to register for it. The great thing is, if you're not like an extremely good programmer, which I'm not, then it will generate a site for you and a form for you, depending upon the format you want. So we basically used a blog site to build a digital exhibition. And this class was on the Brownings. So a big question we were asking, this is the homepage of our exhibition, was how do you make these poets who could seem so different and irrelevant to our time? There's so much in the past, and especially these rare things we have on campus related to them that could again seem like, well, why does that matter? How do those poets and these rare things we have on campus actually speak very directly to our world and our time? So the Brownings in our world was our theme. And students came up with a uniting explanation of the exhibition that we were going to put together. We worked on this over the course of the semester, refining our vision for it. And it broke down to 3 main sections: power and injustice, relating to nature, and redefining faith. So I'll just give you a quick sense of how it worked. It was, again, very easy for the students in lots of ways because the pages I could pre-design and they would just upload content. So here's the power and injustice section. There's a couple, each students have different entries that they were responsible for within that. The relating to nature section, and then the redefining faith section. And each of these represent a link to an exhibit. So just to give you a sense of what those exhibits looked like, this is one of them in the power and justice. It's about complicit activism, the way that Elizabeth Barrett Browning was protesting slavery, while also having much of her fortune come from that in her family history. So what does it mean to protest what you actually have benefited from? And the student decided to make this very contemporary by linking to a survey on how many slaves in effect work for us with the basic products that we have. So even if we want to protest unjust labor, are we in a way complicit? And each student began with a short video. I won't play it here, where they explained their exhibit. And then they had a narrative, an image that they tied to that main narrative. And then they would show 3 items and try to engage people with it. And so people could see it better, they'd have it. We had a gallery, which is easy to build on blogs. And they could people could get better images of what they were talking about. Also, we used Cove, which is it sounds more complicated than it is. It's a very user-friendly tool to build a digital map and a timeline. This is really designed for students, I can say, and teachers. I can say more about it if people are interested later, but the timeline would link, or the map would link different places to the exhibits that students mentioned. And then the timeline, would give you different moments in time that you could go through related to the exhibits. So I found that this really helped us feel like a shared mission and product that we can make together despite all these evolving things. And it was exciting. Last Wednesday, we unveiled it with our guests, and it seemed very well received. So I think it made them feel like there was some good closure to a semester that was otherwise just in lots of ways with all the modalities we had to go through. So I'll stop there.
Thanks, Josh. That's a great idea to have kind of like a class project that helps create community when we're struggling to do that so much. So, but yeah, if you guys have more questions about Cove or blogs, Josh can certainly answer those because they are easier to use than they probably look. Caitlin and Nicole, since you guys are in the same screen, I'll just let you guys go back to back.
Sounds good. Well, one of the things that I always try to focus on each semester is building community in my class. And I found that it was much more difficult this semester. I think that having the masks on in general just created a barrier. And I found even getting my students to respond to me, it's always sometimes hard to generate class discussion, and it was even more difficult. And I had tried at the beginning of the semester to have them do introductory videos, and they watched them. And that was great because we got to see their faces without the masks and they were able to connect. But they still just weren't interacting with each other in the classroom. And so about a month in, I decided to add an element to our daily check-in question. And after I called on the first person, they needed to call on the next person by name. And I explained to them that it was important to know the names of the people around us, that a lot of them had expressed in their reflections about how they were missing community and missing interactions with people, and that this was an opportunity to build community, that we needed to treat our time together as sacred space and not focus on having screens. And so, put away the laptops, put away the phones, and really pay attention to each other. And what I found is just doing that small thing really changed the dynamics in the classroom. They started learning each other's names, calling on each other, responding to each other. They started having conversations. You walk in and like they're having conversations outside the classroom. They were building connections as they were leaving. Their peer review sessions were so much stronger because they cared about the other people. And their final reflection, they were just supposed to focus on how they grew as writers, but so much of them talked about how much they valued learning each other's names and the community that was built, and that because it was a safe space and they knew each other well, they felt like they could ask questions and even fail and like expose different aspects of their writing to each other. And so it really ended up being very successful.
I actually did the same thing after Caitlin told me that it was working so well with her class. So getting them to call on each other during the roll call question is really useful, because otherwise, especially with the masks, they don't even know who's sitting behind them because they're so far apart. And so they just fill that physical space. The thing that I wanted to talk about was remembering that, because, as Holly said earlier, even though we're in face-to-face, in a lot of ways, it's useful to approach it as still a hybrid class, because you are constantly going to have, I sometimes would have half my students gone at a given time. And so being able to really create good rhythms for however your class works, really thinking about how easy is it for my students to pick up where they left off in class, be able to continue outside of class, and be able to plug back in. So a few things that I did to try and work with that was just to use simply a lot of Google Docs and a lot of Google Slides, because they were artifacts that would exist then for the students outside of class. There wasn't anything that I needed to do to have to repost it. So they could, whether I was doing some sort of group work in class, or students were teaching some concepts. That's usually what I'd use Google Slides for, is put them in groups and then give them each a slide to work on. Then that document was still live for them to be able to access again. And similarly, just using discussion board on Canvas, particularly for my writing classes, I had them post nearly every piece of process work on their discussion board with their writing group. So that in class, I had the flexibility to tell them, okay, look at the post below yours and give feedback on that one. And if that was the rhythm I always did, if someone was out of class, they always knew that the post below theirs was the one they gave feedback on that day. And so similar to what Holly said, creating some of those rhythms that are just simple, because I think a lot of what this semester showed me is that even though I like things to be quite intricate, that simplicity is really the way to go to help the students stay connected. The one other way that I use discussion boards, I was teaching a class over in the BIC, and so it was a little bit different content, but when students, before they come to class, they'd simply post a discussion question on the discussion board. So very similar to what we tend to do in literature classes. But then if they were missing class, I'd have them respond to 2 of the questions as their kind of participation credit. And then I also gave students the option to then respond again after we had our class discussion, and they could bring in and connect. I gave them an extra credit point if they could connect to our in-class discussion, responding to someone's question on that board. And so it created, for the students especially who are out of class, a little more of that back and forth discussion, since I wasn't doing kind of a Zoom way of synchronous for my out of class students. So I felt that was really useful, and it gave students a chance to feel a bit more connected. And then a final practical concern when you're thinking about teaching in class and the hybrid aspect of it, the mics, I wish they were better. So just keeping in mind that you are mic'd, but the rest of your classroom isn't. So if you have a discussion-based class, for most classrooms don't have an omnidirectional mic that's picking up all students. And so keeping that in mind as far as when they're watching the videos, they're only hearing you for the most part, unless you're echoing back what your students are saying. So that's something to keep in mind. And also that you're gonna have a mic pack. So that's just kind of an odd thing in the classroom to get used to. Sometimes the clips break and you just carry it around the entire time. So just a practical concern to keep in mind.
Thank you both. Gosh, those practical things are so important. Thanks for sharing and helping to create community in the classroom. I love both of those suggestions. Melissa, I think I saw you. Yeah, there you are. Would you like to go now?
Yeah, great to see everyone. So I'm just going to kind of expand upon this idea of group work, and that people have already brought up, kind of creating the community. And that was one thing I kind of came into this semester saying, oh, that's going to be the advantage, right? That's going to be the advantage of face-to-face. We can still do group work. And I quickly realized the first day that it was not going to work as I had hoped, or as it has in the past. I tried to do this project the first day, and I thought, okay, these are upperclassmen, and they already kind of knew some of them knew each other, most of them did. And I said, all right, I'm going to do this project where I have them on the first day kind of create these symbolic models about processes and language, which I've done in the past and always works great. But I noticed the first time I got them together on the first day, and they were spread apart enough, they all had their masks on. And real quickly, I realized that some of them that wanted to be heard, they were getting uncomfortably too close. And then I felt like this elementary teacher, keep your space, stay in your spot, right? Which I knew I didn't want to play that role all semester. I do that enough with my own kids. I'm like, I don't need to do this here. And then they also talked so loud sometimes that I couldn't even think the room was so loud. And I knew that that was probably an issue for them too. So it became, and then also often when they do group work, I have them kind of create, like in this case, they were creating this symbolic model. So they would have one piece of paper, which means you also don't want to have them passing papers back and forth either. Another thing that became a challenge. So I left that first class, having controlled it pretty well, but saying we can't do this all semester. We've got to find another way to do this. And also, as others have noted, it's not nobody that's simultaneously learning online or that is at home can partake in that at all. So I left and I investigated several things. I'm like, okay, how can I do this? Group work is so important to the class, the discussion amongst the students. And so I settled on trying Canvas groups for a few reasons. I looked into Google Documents, which I did use some as well, but I had used Canvas groups within a discussion board. So I had used discussion board a lot, and in that kind of the same way where they would do discussion questions before class, which again, I highly recommend. That's been really great, and having other students respond. But I had never done it with groups before, and maybe some of you have done that, but it worked really well because what I would do, and I can, let me share my screen and just show this. Some of you may be really familiar with doing groups in Canvas, for which this won't be new, but let me see if I can just share this. Let's see. Can you guys see that? Okay, so what I did, so if you know this part, I'll just show this real quickly, but when you go in under people, you can create groups. And so I created multiple groups throughout the semester for different projects. And then when you create your group set, you can give it a name, and then you can have Canvas randomly split them in groups, or you can create the groups, which I did in several cases to kind of make sure that, you know, students of different backgrounds were together, you know, or with different interests in, you know, in linguistics. And then once you have the groups, then when you go to create a discussion board, you can make it a graded discussion board, which is also another benefit I found of doing this in Canvas as opposed to doing just a Google Doc, because then I had it right there in front of me and I could give them a grade. And sometimes it was just a participation grade that they, you know, took part in this and they responded. And sometimes it was, you know, a grade based on how well they did. But here, when you do, then you say that it's a group discussion, and you can select the group category. So in each of the different group sets.
Hey, Melissa, sorry to interrupt you. Are you showing us different things? Because we're still seeing just one.
Oh, you are? As I'm scrolling down, you can't see?
You might have to unshare to pick a new screen and then share it again. Sometimes.
Okay, let me try that again. Let's see.
Yeah, anytime that you switch, you have to unshare and reshare.
Let's see, can you see this now?
Yeah, yeah.
Okay, so so after creating a group set where you can split the students how you want, and you can just drag them into different groups, or again, do it, have Canvas do it randomly. Then when you go into a discussion board and you create a new discussion, you can make it a group discussion, and then you can select which group set you want. So I have, for example, this first one, research project feedback groups, was one that works really well. I normally have them give each other feedback as they're kind of designing a project, a research project. And it ends up being a great kind of discussion where they, you know, help each other and give peer feedback in class. But what I did this time is I first created this group, and then they started this process of sharing the research question that they wanted to look into on a Canvas group, responding to each other, asking clarifying, you know, clarification questions within this group, on this discussion group. And usually there were only like 3 or 4 students in a given group. And then they would follow up on that conversation in class. And so we would have some time in class, but it was more focused discussion in class. They already knew the projects of their peers. So this is an example here. So this is this one, the research question draft for feedback. And you can see that there's the 4 different groups. And so then I was also able to follow their discussions a lot better and give them feedback, which was great. So they would, here's an example from group 1, where they, you know, would propose what they're thinking for their research question. And then the other students in their group would give them some feedback. And what was great is then they came in class and they discussed it more, but I would let them have their computers out during that time. And so they were able to keep their distance. They weren't yelling like, wait, what is that? Because they already had an idea of what was going on. And then if they were absent, they were still able to participate. In class, they would give each other more feedback, but often they would also jot it down as a quick note to remind, you know, whoever their classmate of what they had suggested, and they would add it to the discussion board. And then I was able to go in and leave feedback. So this turned into something that, regardless of COVID situation, I'd probably do this again. It just kind of facilitated more focused and meaningful discussion in class because they kind of had this background knowledge, and then they could continue that discussion in the Canvas boards. And it's also nice because I had another activity where I had them post a video of an activity that they did. You can post videos, you can post documents, you can post all of that and get peer feedback. And then, doing it within the groups. And it was also nice to be able to change up the groups, which is real easy to do here. And then they would move around in the classroom, but they would still keep their distance. So that worked out really well. I did do some with Google Docs too, but I ended up preferring this for some of those reasons, like being able to grade it and kind of keeping that thread and organization that the discussion board allows. So that was, let me just stop sharing there. So that worked out really well. And I also, one other thing I was going to note too, that was probably a big change, but ended up being a positive thing that I'd probably also continue to do, is with homework. So I used to have students bring homework into class and I would collect it. And sometimes it was responses, sometimes it was for accuracy, depending what type of linguistics class it was. And this semester, I didn't want to do all that exchanging of papers. So I started having them just submit their homework, a clear picture or a PDF, which I've learned real easy ways they can do that even on iPhones through Notes. And they would submit it on Canvas. And then when they came to class, I told them to bring a printed copy. So then what we would do in class is we would discuss that homework assignment, and they could jot down any feedback or, responses that were incorrect, or other ideas that I offered, to address it. And then what was great is then they took that home with them. They never turned it in because I had it on Canvas. It had to be submitted before class time. Then when I went to grade, it took a lot less time to grade because I knew I didn't need to give the extensive feedback because we had already discussed it where they could actually write it down on their assignment. But even though we discussed it before, it's real different when, especially in some of the classes that have like the syntax class and some of those grammar classes, where they could actually just write down the correct answers, correct anything, add things right there on their assignment. Then when I went to go grade them, I would just do quick notes here and there if I needed to, but I didn't have to do the extensive feedback that I had before. And it was nice because we never had to exchange any papers in class. So those are some quick ideas.
Thanks, Melissa. I'm seeing a way too that you could maybe combine Nicole's idea of that sort of back and forth discussion and an ongoing discussion with using those discussion boards on Canvas, because then you could just start a discussion on, say, a particular literary text for literature folks or a particular concept in a more concept-based class, and then students could comment before, at class, after class, but the ongoing nature of that thread is helpful.
And one thing too related to that is that ended up being good is I would tell them throughout the semester that they needed to respond on basic discussion boards that were more topic focused, like what you're saying, and they would have to respond a certain number of times. And we upped that this semester since there were so many that were not face-to-face. And that worked really well, but then they could kind of choose when they wanted to respond. And it's so easy to grade in Canvas because you can see how many times people have responded and offered feedback.
Yeah, awesome. Thanks very much, Melissa. All right, Molly, would you like to share?
Sure. So a few people have already mentioned that one of the biggest challenges is students actually being in the room. And that's not just because they're quarantined. I taught an 8 a.m. class, and if you're not grading attendance, it's very difficult for any of them to be motivated to appear. It's difficult for me to be motivated to appear. So a lot of things that I would never have been interested in before COVID either became necessary or helpful, whether because of COVID or otherwise. For example, I would have never before allowed laptops in class. I'm one of those people. But since all assignments are virtual and I don't want to be handing around papers, laptops became ubiquitous. It was a very tech-focused classroom. And that will probably be something I actually keep in the future because they were fairly responsible about it, more so than I thought that they would be. So there are a lot of things that I realized I was sort of enacting out of a kind of need for a sense of authority that there was no reason for in actual practice. Presentations are one of those things that I really don't I have not wanted to assign much in the past, largely because as an undergraduate, I really hated them, either because, especially if they were group presentations, you know, you could never, there was never a guarantee that other people would do their part. And I was also a very nervous undergraduate and did not like speaking in front of people. Very different than I am today. So presentation days have actually become some of the most valuable class experiences this semester for a host of reasons. They force the students to work together in ways that COVID had made more difficult in the actual classroom setting. It's a way for students to essentially do group work, and I'm not worried about the space that they are sitting. I'm not worried about moving desks, because they move to the front of the room and keep their distance from one another up there. We have to pass the mic back and forth, which is fine. A cat just joined me, so Kristen, you might get your wish after all. So part of my focus on presentations this semester was just a repeat, really, of things I had done in the past, with kind of a few adjustments for distance, like making sure that they pass mics, making sure that they are standing or sitting at a distance from one another, making sure that they're able to work together on their presentations virtually rather than working on it in person necessarily in class. But a lot of things I had done before, like the presentation elements, each student is responsible for a part of the presentation that isn't contingent on the others. So in a time of COVID, if somebody is absent from their own presentation group, it doesn't actually affect the whole, which is helpful, because the presentations that I've done in the past have always been focused on presenting their own research on their research papers. So it doesn't actually have anything to do with anyone else's work. And they're able to, we're essentially modeling a panel presentation like you would have at a conference. And we usually do it near the end of the semester. But one of the things aspirationally I want to be doing this spring is converting that into panel presentations in which they each are independently responsible for an element that is not contingent on the others, so that if they're absent, they can do it virtually, filming and uploading it to Canvas. But to convert that into presentations for the things that are most boring to sit in and listen to if they're coming from me, the instructor, which is really like textbook readings. So they're going to be doing teaching from the textbook, each taking an aspect of the textbook reading. And as much as that might seem just as boring for the students in the seats to listen to one another, it's always more interesting to listen to one another than it is to listen to your teacher another day. But also the one element of this that encourages attendance, if you are not required to stay home, is that half of the grade is actually dependent on their responses to the presenters. And this has always been the case pre-COVID and in COVID. Every student is required to write a probing question in response to each presenter who's up at the front. You don't have to ask a question if you're one of the panel presenters, but if you're in the seats, you're required to ask a question of the panel presenters, and you share that question on a shared Google Doc afterwards, so everybody can see one another's questions. The presenters can go back and look at them. But I really emphasize, I talk about what conferences are like. I don't know that any of them will ever be at an academic conference, but conferences exist in a variety of fields. And I kind of cast a vision for them in the seats as hosts of the people on the panel, which gives them a sense of urgency to make sure that every person on the panel is asked a question verbally during class as well. And so they're graded on adding a question for every presenter to the Google Doc, and asking one question aloud over the course of the presentations as a whole. So if they're nervous about asking a question verbally, it doesn't have to be anything important. Most of the question work that they can do will be on the Google Doc, but it ends up being probably some of the most engaged conversation that the classroom has in the whole semester, because they have a sense of ownership of the whole day, and I'm just sitting back and letting them run the show. So when I convert this in the spring for the teach the textbook sections, I'll probably only have that be half of the class period. But the advantage is it motivates them to be in the classroom if they can, because the virtual presentations are much more tedious than to do it all in the actual classroom. So it motivates them to be in person if they can. It motivates them to work together and to respond to one another and to get to know each other. And for those students I have who are terrified of presenting, the presentations themselves, because they're in comparison with the question asking such a small part of the grade, that there's not a whole lot of burden to perform well. You just have to, the burden is on making sure that your colleagues in the room actually know they were learning something, and you can literally read off of a piece of paper. I make this as low pressure as possible. So I had a student, the one real challenge here, this semester was I had a student who had such a significant phobia of speaking aloud in front of a room that in another class, when a professor had called on her, she blacked out. And then when she came to, had to run out of the classroom in order to vomit. So I've made adjustments for certain students in situations like that. But generally speaking, it has been the most effective way for me to make sure that every non-quarantine student actually appears. And while it cannot necessarily happen for every single class period, it's going to be, I think, a much more significant part of how I structure class discussion and group work in the spring. So again, aspirational, but partly based on a little bit of experience, and that's it.
Thanks, Molly. I love the idea of having the students ask questions. I wonder if we could combine that with the poll everywhere and the Jamboard ideas to where students could actually in real time post things. So before I open it up for discussion, I want to just say a couple of comments from Christy Humphreys, who had a conflict and couldn't be here, but she had a couple of those really pragmatic suggestions that you might not even think of. And so I wanted to just kind of verbally say those. For people who haven't found a good mask to speak in, she said she had a lot of trouble with constantly breathing the material in. So they actually make silicone mask inserts, or kind of like a bracket. And I just Googled this really quickly and it does come up. And so she used one of those inside her mask, and she said that solved that problem for her. She also wanted, she used door stops, and I don't know if there are rules about the doors being open or not. I have yet to look at the classroom management protocol that I know Kevin has sent us. But she said if you want the doors open, there's not always door stops. So she carried her own door stops with her, and the students really liked that. Back to the issue of learning students' names, which she said was also hard, as some of you mentioned with the mask, is that she used a seating chart for the first time, and Canvas has a built-in seating chart. It's under the attendance feature, which she said you may not realize. The attendance feature has both the list, which is what comes up first, but you can switch it to the chart. And so she told the students to pick a seat on the first day, and then she just moved their names around in that Canvas chart. And then that's how she would work on calling them in class. And so kind of like Caitlin was saying, using their names was she found to be really important, but she just couldn't learn everyone's names as fast. And so she really used that roll call chart. She also kept a box of disposable masks with her, although maybe the students by the spring will be more in that habit, but she did have students who would occasionally forget and come in. And so she would have those for her. And then also similar to what people were saying in terms of trying to cut down on the paper exchange, she also had students turn in all their homework online through Canvas. But the tip that she wanted to share was that she started using the Canvas video feedback feature, which is located right underneath the box where it says leave comments. you'll notice there's a little video icon. And if you click on that, instead of typing comments, you can leave voice comments. And she said it saved time, but also that the students appreciated that slightly extra, more personal dimension of the comments. And so again, just maybe a feature on Canvas. I had not known that that was there. And so something that if they're already turning everything online anyways, and maybe you're tired of using the comment feature in Word, that you can try some video comments. So those were a few ideas from Christy that I just wanted to share with you guys. But I'm just going to open it up now. So if anyone has a follow-up question to something that you heard, if you have your own idea, if you have a problem that hasn't been addressed that you want to hear people's ideas for, anything like that would be great to talk about for the next kind of 10 to 12 minutes.
Mary, I had a question about Jamboard. So there was one of the images you showed us where it had a poem and then there were sticky notes next to it and then arrows. Are students able to draw arrows from their sticky note to the text?
Yes, so there's a drawing feature. They can draw, they can add sticky notes, they can add text, and they can add pictures. So yeah.
Okay. Thank you.
Sure.
I saw over in the chat, some of you were talking about this. I'm just real bad at doing both the chat and the video at the same time. But the issue of the microphone in the classes and recording yourself. So literally when you walked in the first day, like how did you even learn how to record yourself? I mean, this is like the basic level that I'm at, right? Like I am just hearing that first day of walking in and I don't even know how to do that part of it.
It automatically will record for you. But the trick is you have to make sure that the computer's actually turned on. So I had 1 or 2 classes where I wasn't using the computer. Someone had turned the computer off and didn't realize it. So you have to make sure the computer's turned on for it to record. And if you want to check, what's the button that you check to see?
Oh, the capture preview.
Yeah, capture preview. You just hit that and you can see that, and to make sure your mic pack is like the bars are moving, because sometimes the microphone will be on mute too, so you have to check and make sure. But it automatically does it for you, and so it's actually pretty easy.
Yeah, it is easy. The other thing to pay attention is make sure your batteries are going to last the whole class periods, and multiple times I'm going to see heads nodding. This happens where you just lose half your audio because the mic died halfway through and you didn't know. So making sure there's always batteries in there, but just double checking that it's going to last the whole time to be sure that it catches it all.
Okay. So do you have to be signed in on the computer to your account for the video recording to be saved to, like, where is the video recording going?
It's going into Canvas, your My Media, which is also on Media Space. I think for most rooms, you don't need to be signed in. One of my rooms, I think I did. It was one of the mics that it didn't have a camera, one of the rooms without a camera. So I don't think most people are teaching in those, but those are slightly different. If you have a room with a camera, it's all automated.
Except for the mic.
True. Yes, you do have to have that on.
It's actually the most important part. It doesn't really matter that it's filming you. It matters that it's picking up your voice.
Thanks, Molly. I could totally see not turning the mic on.
Hey, and you can also turn off. I had technology help, classroom technology help me figure out that in our situation with the students going in and out, that another option is to not turn off that automatic recording and instead record via Zoom. And then that way you have the option that students, if you want to on certain days, or if you want to offer it all the time, students could join synchronously from home. So I use Zoom every time to record. I did not use the Culture. I turned it off every time and just would join via Zoom. I created the Zoom links right in Canvas. And then that was really nice, because at least in some of my courses where it was ideal to join synchronously, then students could join that way, and they would just click on the link right in Canvas, the Zoom tab in Canvas, and join at the beginning of class. So you don't have to use that recording that they have, the automatic recording, if you don't want to. You can also just do it. And when students didn't join, I just would record it via Zoom and post that And it posts automatically. All you got to do is press a button in Canvas. You don't have to upload anything for Zoom either, and it's right there as well.
Nice. Thanks, guys. Other questions, ideas, comments?
I have a question. For 1310, I did a theme, the music theme, and we had a guest speaker come in virtually via Zoom. I did not anticipate the trouble for the speaker being able to see the class very well. So I brought in a laptop and had it facing the class where he could at least have some sense of the number of people in the room and things like that. But I was just curious if anybody else had a guest visit your class this semester that maybe set that up a little bit better than I did, so I can do it better next semester if I have a guest that I need to use. But we had a professional musician who just talked about different aspects of music. And so that was helpful. I think the class really enjoyed that because it wasn't just me up there talking again. And so I was just curious if anybody else had an experience with a guest speaker virtually in your classroom.
Lane, I did. One thing that might help it depends on your room, but if your room doesn't have a camera in it at all, then, webcams, you can get a webcam for not too much that has a tripod, and you can get an extension cord for it to go to your laptop so that basically you can give an extra camera that's closer to the students.
You might also be able to check something like that out from TechPoint, especially if you're just using it for one class period.
Lane, I would also email Mike DePalma. His email address is actually Michael_DePalma if you've not emailed him. I know he has technology that he has used like that. This was actually pre-COVID, but just because he has a lot of guest speakers that he Zooms into his classes. And so he could be someone to either talk to about what technology he uses or maybe even just borrowing it from him if it is just that occasional need.
I know that my classroom, the one that didn't have a camera to begin with, at one point a webcam appeared and then there was a webcam in the room. So tech might actually just have them to distribute. And there may also be some omnidirection mics too. So that might be something we can also talk to tech about getting more of those. I know that at least one person got an omnidirectional mic to be able to sit in the center of his classroom so that during Zoom, synchronous students could come in and actually hear everyone. So I don't know if that's something Baylor would be moving towards or not, but I do know that they're kind of expensive and probably in short supply because of COVID.
Other questions, ideas? We have time for maybe one or two more.
I have a question real quick, Kristen, if that's okay. This is Ryan.
Yes, Ryan, please.
This is mostly for the grad students. I was curious about strategies that they felt were effective while they were in class when it comes to the face-to-face classes that you took this semester. Because I think most of what we're talking about is larger undergraduate classes, but I'm curious what the grad students felt like were effective strategies for the face-to-face classes this semester, or might be good for the spring.
Do we have grad students that took in-person classes on the meeting? We might not, because I know there were a lot of online too. Well, Ryan, maybe what we can do is circulate that question to the grad students. I'm looking at you, Holly, or Molly, or Caitlin, or Nicole, or Stuart. Yeah, I'd like to know that answer too. So we'll get that offline, Ryan. Any other questions or comments? Kind of going back to the technology question that Lane raised, and I saw someone posted, Holly posted that a survey had gone around. The people that are on that teaching and technology committee from IT really keep saying, if there's an IT need, please let us know. Now, obviously that's not a guarantee that they're going to provide the equipment. But I think short of completely redoing a room, especially if you just have a specific equipment request, they really want to try to meet those needs. So I would just encourage Lane and other people who have a desire for some equipment to make the ask, because I think now more than ever, they're trying to meet those needs. So it was great to see you all. Thank you all for your brilliant wisdom. I did remember to record this meeting, except for I think the first 3 or 4 minutes. So I'll get it posted to the Canvas Teaching Literature Colloquium site. So if you want to access some of the tips and pointers again, and I might follow up with a few of the presenters to maybe just submit a quick Word document to me that I can post to that Teaching Colloquium site too. So thank you all. Good luck with the final crazy push.